Hello. Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. As John has said, I'm head of art at Abbey College. I'm just going to share my screen with you. There we are. And there we are. Just getting that at the moment. Oops, daisy. Right, so this talk today is really about the importance of studying art for architecture. And the first thing I'd like to talk to you about, and probably the most important thing, is these words form and function. So when we're discussing architecture, one of the most common terms used are these words, form and function. But what do we mean by this? What does this mean for you lot? So Louis Sullivan, who is an American architect, said, all things in nature have a shape, that is to say, a form, an outward semblance that tell us what they are, that distinguishes them from ourselves and from each other. Now, this quote is really the key to understanding this term form and function. So on the right, you'll see this lovely picture of this beautiful shell. And we need to think about why, when we look at that form of the shell, we need to understand its function. And to us, clearly, it's very strong, hard, it can withstand knocks. And of course, the purpose of the shell is protection, isn't it? It protects this mollusk or strange sea creature that lives inside it that has no protection, and its home is inside the shell. And it's the same with buildings. So just as the shell is a building, a house for a sea creature, so all buildings have a function as well. And I want you really to take away from this that every building has a story to tell, and it can nearly, not always, but nearly always be determined by its form and its function. So we're going to start off looking at this building, which actually is really close to Abbey College, Cambridge. It's called the Fitzwilliam Museum. Now, let's have a little look at it, first of all, just from what we call its formal analysis, what we can see, the shapes and everything else. First of all, you can see that it's a symmetrical building. You could almost, at that point there, if I use my cursor, you can see that you can almost fold it in half. It's symmetrical. We have what's called a portico, this area here, which you have to go under in order to enter into the building. We have these columns, smooth columns here, and on top, we've got all of these called capitals. They're actually called Corinthian capitals. More of that later. On top of that, we have what's called an entablature, and then we have this pediment, this triangular piece over there, which is crammed full of sculpture. We have pilasters. These are flat pillars, which have got lines on, grooves, which are called flutes. And again, we've got the Corinthian capitals. We've got niches, which sculptures would go in. We've got these wreaths over here. You might notice also these little sort of marks over here. These are called dentiles. And it comes after the word dent, meaning teeth. If you think of English, going to see the dentist for your teeth, because they look like little teeth. So we've looked at the building now. We've noticed certain things about it. We're going to come in now for a little bit of a close-up where you can see a little bit more detail of the pediment. So in the pediment, we've got these sculptures, and you can see here that the architect has designed them to fit in. So he's got a very awkward space to put in there. He's got, obviously that's the tallest part and small bits. So he's got in here a standing figure in the middle, and they gradually get more crouchy and sort of lying down like that. Now these are, on this particular pediment, these are what we call the muses from ancient antiquity, from ancient Greek and Rome. These were the ancient gods, the muses, that inspired people. So we have things like Calliope is one of the characters who inspired poetry, or Clio, who inspired history. And of course, there are nine muses in ancient mythology, and there are 9 muses here because it's a museum. There we are, there's the clue. Look at the inside of this museum. As you walk through that portico, you come into this interior. with this sweeping staircase. And my goodness, it's lavish, isn't it? Absolutely ornate and decorated. And again, we have the echoes from outside. We've got this smooth marble column with the Corinthian capital. These are called caryatids, these sculptures holding up the lintel. We've got the balustrade, and look down here, we've got the mosaic floor. All these elements come from ancient Greece and Rome. So we've looked at the form now, and let's have a little think about the context of this building. So this building was built to house a collection, an amazing collection of art that was left to the University of Cambridge by a man called Viscount Fitzwilliam, which is why it's called the Fitzwilliam Museum. Now, he left in his will his considerable collection, very, very valuable, to the University of Cambridge. In fact, he actually was a student here. He was at Trinity Hall. And to understand this museum, you have to really understand why he was a collector. In those days, really from the sort of late 17th century to the mid 19th century, it was very customary for the children of gentlemen and aristocracy to go to Europe on what was called a grand tour, Think of the modern day gap year. But they would go for a year, and the purpose of that was to visit all the sites of antiquity from ancient Greek and Rome, and also the Renaissance. So they would go to places like Florence and Rome and Athens and many, many, many more. Now, the main purpose of this was to get this, the primary purpose of going on this grand tour was to be exposed to this legacy of classical antiquity and the Renaissance. And waiting for them in their hordes when these very rich English people arrived were lots of people trying to sell them books and ancient books and maps and sculptures and works of art. And they would come back from their grand tour with crate loads of these. And it would really, they felt it was essential to deck out their homes and have these collections to demonstrate to everybody, firstly, look how rich I am, but mostly really is, look how cultured I am. Look at me, I've got these incredible things from the most amazing time in the world's history, that I have got all this ancient art on display. It gave them polish and demonstrated intellect, or so they hoped. So what better than this building? So the University of Cambridge put out a competition to all architects to see if they could come up with a design. And this design won, and it was by an architect called Bahai. And it was actually started to be built in 1834. So let's have a look again at this building. It is so appropriate, isn't it? If you think about what was inside it. I mean, it's been added to recently, but what was inside it. So the purpose of this building is really to house a classical collection. And of course, they have a classical building. Let me just show you this building here. This is the Temple of Zeus. I'll put this slide in over here. This is in Athens. And the reason I pop this slide in here is you can see that it has got this Corinthian capital, which Bahai has used in the Fitzwilliam Museum. We've got all these here fluted columns, but have a little peek just behind the Temple of Zeus and you'll see this building up on here. Now this is called the Parthenon, and some of you, if you've visited Athens, you've definitely gone to see it as a tourist. This was up, this is that was called the Parthenon, and I'm going to show you now a reconstructed wooden model of it over here, which gives you an idea of what it looked like. I have to say one thing is missing from this model, and that is colour, because it was highly decorated and painted, but because of time and lashing rain and weather, by the time people discovered it, really, it was just the white marble that it is. And people didn't realize that until experts got involved. So architects like Bahai would have assumed that all classical architecture was white marble. And here we have, let's have a look here. We've got the columns and the portico. we've got the flutes on these columns, but this actually is what's called Doric. It's a very plain, it's the first order of the capitals. We have the entablature here. We've got on the architrave here, we've got, these are called triglyphs because they're 3 lines and gaps. And there would have been sculptures, the metopes on those here. But look at the way the sculpture has been crammed in to this triangular space. So you can definitely see, can't you, where the connections are coming from. So we've looked at the form, we've looked at the bits that make up this building, and we've talked a little bit about the function. And we can now understand this building, can't we, from what we've looked at it. But consider this, I actually think it really, the function almost expresses more than that. Because in those days, in the 19th century, when this was built, people looked back to the times of the classical period of ancient Greek and Rome as one of a golden age. And they revered that time. They revered the philosophers, the architects, the artists, the writers, the poets. And this is almost like a temple to worship those goods inside, worship those artifacts. These artifacts are to be revered. So we have this function and the form matches the function. Now I'm going to move on and have a look at this. Oh my goodness me, what a difference. This is also an art museum. This is the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao in northern France. And it was designed by an architect, a sort of Canadian-American architect called Frank Gehry. And it was completed, it was opened, or they say inaugurated, in 1997. Well, my goodness me, what a difference. 2 art museums, 2 completely different periods in history and 2 completely different architectural styles. And I don't know about you, I absolutely love it. It's so exciting to look at, isn't it? So we'll have a little look at that. Let's have a look now at the form. Let's see what it's made of, the actual form. So we're presented here with all these fragmented shapes. There's a sense of chaos, isn't there? There's no symmetry, like the Fitzwilliam Museum. It's asymmetric, and it's made of components. It's almost as if they've been disassembled and reassembled and put together in a sort of haphazard way. It's what we say devoid. It doesn't really have a logic to it, and I like that. I love that. The exterior is covered in these titanium plates. If you look close, you can kind of see how they are. And I don't know about you, but for me, it really feels like, it seems to me like the skin of a sardine. I don't know whether you've seen sardines swimming, but even if you've eaten a sardine, it's got that incredible shimmer across the surface. I love that. And the shapes to me also remind me of the shape of a boat. Don't you think, having a look at that? So we've got this manipulation of the structure of the Guggenheim, but we need to understand now kind of what the hell is going on in this picture, in this building. It's so different. Well, it was commissioned by the sort of local government of Bilbao. And Bilbao in its past, in the 19th century, was a real powerhouse of industrial maritime business. So that's when they made lots and lots of ships there. But since then, it had lost its business and gone down and down hill. And the whole of Bilbao is a bit what we call decrepit, a bit falling apart and quite rough. And the local government wanted something to kind of energize it and transform the town of Bilbao and put Bilbao back on the map again of a place to visit. And so they put up $100 million, American dollars, to get this made, which is incredibly generous for a building. But my goodness me, what a statement it is. I mean, I think it's worked for them. You'll find that in many regeneration schemes in towns, they often looked for artists or art collections to kind of add a bit of oomph to the place, and it does certainly work. So in 1991, they put this commission out, and a lot of people applied, and Frank Gehry won the competition. Now, I want you to have a little look at, we've looked at the shapes, we've looked at the covers of the titanium plates. He made this actually using computer software. He couldn't have done it without the software. It was actually an aerospace software he had called CATIA. And you can kind of also see that effect on the forms. It almost looks in places a bit like the wing of an aircraft. Well, I think it does. You can kind of see that connection there. So we've looked at the form. Let's have a think about the function. I want you to have a look at, there's another lovely picture of it in a different time of day. Beautiful lights and darks bouncing off it. Now this is an artist, a sculptor, an English one called Anthony Caro. And I'm just showing you these because these were made 7 years before the Guggenheim Bilbao was actually commissioned. And I think you can probably see visually there are some similarities. So what is Anthony Caro doing here? He's certainly not trying to create a sculpture that looks like something that represents something. You know, it's not a head, it's not a body, it's not a bowl of fruit. It's abstract forms, and he's very interested in the relationship of these abstract forms as they form a whole. And he was very successful with these sculptures. They were widely exhibited. Incidentally, he did actually know Frank Gehry, and they did work together on a project. It's quite nice to know that link as well, isn't it? So we're looking at these pictures. I think you can see the visual connection if I go back over here. Right. What is the form? What is the function? We've looked at the form. It's chaotic. It's disassembled and reassembled. This style of architecture, by the way, is called deconstructivism. It's a very long word, isn't it? Or it's called decon for short. You can kind of see why. And we've got this interest in materiality of the building. So what is the point of this? Well, again, the function is to house a contemporary modern art collection. And I would argue that the form does fit the function, just like with the Fitzwilliam Museum, which is a temple to worship, a classical temple to worship the classical things inside. Gehry's Bilbao building is a contemporary work of art. It's a sculpture. It's a contemporary work of sculpture that houses contemporary art. So the two things go together really, really well. Right. Are you ready, folks? I want you to have a look at this building. And some of you might know it, but if you do, I want you now to think about what the function and the form of this building is. We're going to come back to this later, but I just want you to have a look at it and think of it. Now we've discussed form and function, and I want you to have a look at this one. So those are two, but I'm not going to say what they are. I'm not going to say who they're by. I'm not going to let any clues out at all. I just want you to have a look at it without any knowledge, hopefully. Right, okay, we're going to move on now because, as you know, this webinar is all about why art is important for studying architecture. And I want you to think now about the formal qualities of art. We've looked at the formal qualities of two buildings, and we've got this idea of formal qualities of art. So things you need to consider are line, tone. Tone means darks and lights. Color. The composition, how things are laid out, the actual design of your work of art. Pictorial depth, which for architecture is so important because you're going to need to visualize your ideas and work out perspective. And texture. All those things make up what we call the formal qualities of art. It's like a visual language, and you need to understand how to do that and have drawing skills and general skill altogether. So all of those things are going to be taught when you study art. I'm just going to go through now actually what the outline of the A-level course is. And you'll see there for the A-level art course, at Abbey College, we teach a course called, a board called AQA. And there are 3 or 4 main boards that offer art A-level in the UK and abroad. but they're all essentially the same. And the areas of study are drawing and painting, mixed media, which includes collage and assemblage, sculpture, ceramics, which is using clay, printmaking, and also the moving image and photography. So when you're studying art, A-level, you're going to be marked on 4 assessment objectives. That's what those AOs mean. And I've put them up here on the slide because it helps you understand what it is you're going to be doing. Now, the first one, they want you to develop ideas through sustained and focused investigations. And they're going to be getting you to look at contextual, which I'll explain in a moment, and other sources demonstrating analytical and critical understanding. So quite a lot of heavy words there, really. What does that mean? What it basically means is the course requires you to study the work of other artists or architects or sculptors. And they want you to understand and almost see through their eyes. It's an incredibly good learning tool, is looking through the eyes of another artist, understanding what was going on at the time they created their work. So if you think about the Fitzwilliam Museum, we've looked at the context there. We looked at the fact that, you know, the context was the grand tour, the collection of classical objects. And we looked at it with Frank Gehry's work at the Guggenheim, where we're looking at the regeneration of Bilbao, this idea, this contemporary modern regeneration of the town has created this building that's there. Those are the motives that lie behind it. So whether you're looking at a painter or a printmaker, they want you to understand what the context, the motives is for making it. And they also want you to understand how the artist has done it. So you will be doing little copies, little collections, bit of research, and that's 25% of the marks. The next thing you're going to be doing is exploring and selecting appropriate resources, media materials, technologies, and processes, refining and reviewing ideas as work develops. Now, this is absolutely really important. And of course, doing art A-level or GCSE will allow you a studio to work in and all the materials, which you can't really have at home unless you're extremely lucky, to mess around and find things. Sometimes when my students are working, I always say, when things go wrong, you don't expect it to go the way you want it to go. Sometimes something really amazing happens. You think, my goodness, man, I didn't expect that to happen, but that is brilliant. I love it. And it can take you off in a different area. So this understanding of how to use oil paint, how to use clay, how to use an etching needle, all these things help you mature as an artist and help you make connections between things. And of course, for architecture, how important is that? Extremely. The next assessment objective is recording ideas, observations, and insights relevant to intentions and reflecting critically on work and progress. So basically, again, putting this into more simple terms, this is, in a way, your observational work, what you see. So it's your drawing, it's your photography, it's your skill. What can you see and how well can you record it? How creative are you? How good are you? This is what this one's about. So very, very important, again, as an architect, this idea of observing, because you are going to, if you are wanting to be an architect, you're going to have to be able to visualize your ideas, to get them down on paper or iPad. And you can't do that unless you know how to. So that's what that one is. And the fourth one is presenting a personal and meaningful response that realizes intentions and, where appropriate, makes connections between visual and other elements. So this one here is basically a final piece or final pieces. So say you were doing a project on, I'm trying to think of something, on portraiture, say, and so you would research some portrait artists, you would experiment perhaps with how you would do it, you would do some really lovely observational work, and then you present a portrait or series of portraits in whatever form it is, and should show a connection to the artist you've been looking at. It shouldn't be a copy. It's got to be your own work, but it's got to show a kind of connection. So those are the sort of things, the practice, if you like, that A-level and GCSE is exactly the same, will take you through. And it's there because it's brilliant. It's there because that's how all artists and architects work. Now, on the course, you're going to be introduced to a variety of different techniques. And it's going to give you the opportunity when you study art to experiment and develop your work. Now on here, I've got two prints. The one on the left is called etching. This is actually acid etching, but we do dry point etching. We have at Abbey College a lovely press actually where we can do lots of stuff with that. The one on the left is by an English artist called Lucian Freud. And going back to the formal qualities of art, if I go back to this one over here, we've got line, tone, color, composition, pictorial, depth, and texture. You can see with this one here, this is all about line, isn't it? This understanding of line. So Lucian Freud here has basically scratched in these lines, which ink gets trapped in to make a print. And he's made that the lines are contour, so they follow the shape of the face. So the forehead of this woman here is rounded. So rather than doing a straight line, he's curved his line. He's curved the hair. He's used the line of the etching needle to curve the hair. He's got, look at this on the chin here. We've got all these curves coming down there. Darks are expressed through lots of lines on top of each other called hatching and cross hatching. And the lights are just the white of the paper. The one on the right is what's called a monoprint. You can only make one of them. And this is more about understanding color and understanding texture and composition. We do all of these at Abbey, as we do this printing technique as well, which is called relief printing. And in this case, it's a lino print where you cut away your design and get this big roller over the top and you form a print from it. You're also going to be making sculptures if you want to. So the one on the left is a real architectural inspired piece. I absolutely love it. It's crazy. I love things like that. So he's put together all these pieces and formed sort of buildings on top of buildings and covered the whole thing with sort of plaster, flicked plaster all over it. I think they're magical and really imaginative. And the one on the right, this is a almost impressionist sculpture, isn't it, of an Italian artist called Medardo Rossi. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, but if I want to be an architect, I've got to do only architectural stuff. No, 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 no. They don't want that, the architectural courses, the colleges. They want to see a real breadth to your work. So you'll be doing lots of different things. And the one on the right would originally have been made from wax, actually, and sculpted out, and of course very difficult because it's so impressionistic. You can barely see the eye, but it's kind of there. And it was then cast in bronze. I'm afraid we don't do that at casting in bronze at Abbey. It's impossible to do that. You need to have a foundry for that. You are going to be painting. So look at the one on the left, this lovely portrait here, where the artist has really concentrated on the features at the middle of the face. You know, look at the detail in those eyes. It's beautiful, isn't it? The lips and the nose. But have you noticed in the background, it's really loosely painted, just daubed on. And the artist, I think, has done that to make sure that you're concentrating intensely at the center of his face. If there was lots going on in the background, I think we'd be distracted. So it's a really good technique. The picture on the right, another technique. So you'll be introduced to lots of different techniques in art. And this one is by Maggie Hambling, who is an English artist who actually doesn't live that far away from Abbey College. She's on the coast in Suffolk. And she walks her dog every day by the beach, and she's completely transfixed and fascinated by the energy and the power of waves. I actually went to see an exhibition of hers, funny enough, at the Fitzwilliam Museum. And these are really, really big paintings. You feel as if you're there with a wave crashing on you. They're absolutely amazing, but they don't photograph well. So take it from me, this looks much better in real life. But look at the gesture, the way that the artist has absolutely put the brush over the top and thick daubs of paint. It's a very emotional, energetic piece compared to this one over here, which is much quieter, more intense. I wonder which one you like the best. Be interesting to find out later. We have inks at Abbey College, and you will wherever you go to study art. And these are lovely experiments. So this one here, just using this really delicate, continuous line, and with lots of blobs of soft diffused ink. But you look at this, how clever this is. Look at where the artist has positioned the face. So there's this little gap. He'd have done the blobs first, and then over the top done the drawing, but he's looked at the shapes to see what form it would suggest. So he probably saw, I would guess he saw this one first and thought that looks like a neck and a chin. He's had to make the neck really long, hasn't he? But it makes her look graceful. And then he's made the front of the face where the light is. So it looks like the light's coming from the side. So although it looks seemingly quite easy and quite, nothing special, I think it's lovely because there's a real sense of what we call an art aesthetic, a lot of thinking and a lot of knowledge that lies behind that picture. And the one on the right is a sort of reinterpretation of a traditional Chinese landscape. But look at that amazing blue ink just popping out of the page, gorgeous. You'll be interested in mixed media, as I've said before. And these ones here, I'll be using newspaper and oil pastel and inks and all sorts of things. And you are going to be taught advanced drawing techniques to improve your observation and photography too. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, goodness me, I really can't draw very well. I don't know if this is for me. Please don't worry about that because you're going to be taught it. And one of the things I always tell my students is that you will be amazed at the progress you make from the beginning of the course. I've got students now who are just flying, and they were very tentative to begin with. They really weren't sure. But once you've got the knowledge and you know what you're doing, it comes a lot easier. So here we've got 3 different approaches to art, to drawing. The one on the left is all about tone. So if we go back to, go very quickly to the line, the list over here of the formal qualities of art. We've got line, tone, color, composition, pictorial depth, and texture. I want you to hold that into your minds. And if we go back, whoops, a daisy over here, you'll see that the one on the left is all about tone. It's not about line, is it? It's very, very dark, and there's a high contrast of light. There's a word for that called chiaroscuro, Italian word. And we've got this sharp contrast. It's very moody and atmospheric. The one in the middle is a bit like the last slide we saw. It's almost like a separation of line and tone put together. And the one on the right is all about subtractive drawing. So it's the opposite of drawing, as you probably know it. So charcoal's rubbed in all over the shape, and then you get a rubber to erase the areas of light. You can probably see where the eraser's gone like that, and then a few extra lines put in. So those sort of advanced techniques you're going to be taught. You're also going to be taught pictorial depth, how to achieve pictorial depth, and vanishing point perspective. And this one on the left is kind of imaginary building. We've got, this is actually called triple vanishing point perspective. But you're going to be taught the lot. So that will really be very useful for you. And the one on the right is about separating line and tone and popping color. I don't know why I put it in. It's just I like it, I think, really. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Photography as well. Now, some people think, oh, I can do photography for my A-level, and they think just getting their phone and taking a few snaps is probably going to produce a good shot. It might do, but I want you to really think when you're doing photography to be really creative. This is the whole point of doing it, is being creative. These 2 photography pieces are on the human form, and such different responses, but both very beautiful in their approach and their aesthetic and their thinking that goes behind them. So what do you need from this A-level course? You've seen the sort of things you're going to be doing, and let's think what the whole point of it is. So expression. Look at this picture. This is all about expression, all about gesture. What am I going about? Color, about emotion. So important. You're going to be taught how to think visually. That is just immense. You need to be able to do that. You've got to be able to establish these visual connections. I mentioned it being about, a visual language. It is. And you need to be able to make sense out of chaos, make your ideas visible, etc., etc. You need to have imagination and creativity. obviously, and you need good observational skills. Now, this is an interesting slide, these two slides here, because I wonder whether you've noticed here. You're probably thinking, oh, Serena's chosen a pear and some garlics. Well, I have. And yeah, they're good drawings. Yes, they are. They're beautifully drawn. The pear on the left's got every little dimple, and, you know, look at that winding stalk for the leaf up here. And we've got all the darks and lights. Look at the way the shadows goes from dark through to light. That's what shadows do. This artist has observed that. Look at the little cast shadow from that stalk. It's very tiny, just there. Lovely details. Likewise with the garlics, we've got so much detail, contour lines, which is what I love, the pop of green on the top over here. But think about the composition. So the artist could have drawn this with the pear right in the middle and the leaf entire. We call that a close composition. But he's chosen to crop it. So we've got the leaf coming off the page, the pear coming off the thing. Same with the garlics over here. And we call that an open composition. He's opening it out. He's opening, or she is opening the composition out. So our minds go beyond the picture. It's a very clever trick, actually. So as a potential architect for studying architecture, one of the biggest things that this A-level course does is it gets you to problem solve. So if you're making a sculpture, you think, well, how are you going to make it? You've got this idea to make a sculpture. What are you going to make it with? How's it going to stand up on its own? What materials, what paint surface will work? Do you need paint? All these things go on. You've got to problem solve because there are no answers a lot of the time, none whatsoever. And that is the beauty of art, because in the art course for GCSE and for A-level, this is probably my favorite thing of the course. You have autonomy. And what we mean by autonomy is that you're going to be doing what you want to do. How many courses let you do that? Maths, you'll be doing, you know, algebra and equations. History, you might be learning a period of history. English, you might be learning set books, biology, photosynthesis, whatever, whole class doing the same. They want you to do your own personal investigations. So at the moment, my students are all studying different things that they've wanted to do. So I might have someone looking at, I'm doing the human form for GCSE at the moment. So I've got some people looking at sport and the movement of the body. I've got another person looking at portraiture. I've got another person looking inside the body, etc., etc. They're all doing different projects. And that is just wonderful because it gives you this independent way of learning. So it's a very unique subject. Right, so we've talked so far about the formal qualities of buildings, and we've looked at the function of buildings, and we've looked at how the art curriculum helps you in four main areas, and especially with your visual thinking and your visual language. Now, one of the things we offer here at Abbey College, and I was amazed when I joined, this is my second year at the school, because I've never worked at a school before that has this. They have 2 lessons a week that are basically dedicated for getting your portfolio ready for university and for studying architecture or fashion design or graphics or whatever it is, interior design that you're wanting to do. So we do fashion and interior, we do all the art. So don't worry if it's architecture you're not particularly interested in. There'll be something on offer for you. So we'll do also a design a house in the desert. I asked a member of staff to be their client, and they have to produce lots of those things over there. So that's a wonderful moment of the week that you can do that. Right, now I must move on quickly. For portfolio preparation for university, you're going to need all these things. This is being filmed, so you can have a look at this later. They want to see freehand drawing, observational drawing. Oh, what's that, number 4? Life drawing. So we're going to move on to that. So for the life drawing, most schools don't offer this. I do offer it at Abbey College, and I offer it in the autumn and spring terms. And basically, it's not compulsory, but it is done after school in the evenings, and we have the opportunity to draw live from a model. And the art colleges and the architectural courses absolutely love this to be present in the portfolio, as you can see from over here on the fourth one down, because it is very difficult. And it's all about proportion, which of course is what architecture is about. If you think about buildings, buildings are in the main designed for people. So everything within the building has to relate to the proportions of the human form. Right, here we are. I asked you, didn't I, before, about the form and function of those buildings. What did you come up with? What did you think? So I'm going to give you, were you right? Did you know this picture? This is by an English designer and architect called Thomas Heatherwick. And I don't know about you, but I absolutely love it. It's just amazing. It's called a seed cathedral, and it was built for the expo in Shanghai in 2010. So I want you to think back now to architecture, thinking about creativity. Where did he get this idea from as a building? It was his idea. It was a competition. The UK government wanted to have an architectural practice represent the UK for this big expo of architecture. That was in 2010. So he thought and thought and thought, and he was walking in the park one day in England, and our parks are full of our public parks are full of amazing plants, and they often are around the world. And in the Victorian age, people used to collect seeds from all over the world and bring them back and have glass houses and hot houses, greenhouses, and grow these amazing seeds and plants. And we have a record of these. If you go to Kew Gardens in London, and you'll find amazing examples there. But actually, most of the parks in England have them. But one thing they don't have are the seeds. And there is a project of trying to collect all the world seeds. At the moment, I think they've got about 66,000. And he decided he was going to do that. So where did he get his inspiration from? He was looking at Jurassic Park film, and he was looking at the amber. I don't know if you've seen the film. There's a little mosquito trapped in amber, which had the DNA in from a dinosaur. That was the film. It's a good idea. And he decided to trap the seeds into an optic hair, an optic rod. And there are 66,000 of these. Can you believe it? It's absolutely incredible. And they all slightly move and sway with the wind as well. And on the end of these are trapped all the different seeds. So this actually moves in the wind. So I don't know about you, but form and function. This to me almost looks like a seed pod. And as the sun comes round, or maybe a cloud goes over the sky, it changes the light within the seed cathedral, and it's there it is lit up by night. So you can see there where this connection, this visual connection of what he's seeing has given him the idea for the form and function of this building. Now, on to the last one. We're on our last slide now, and then any questions if you've got it. Does anyone know this building, and anyone have a thought about what it could be? So it is the Bahai temple in Santiago in Chile, and it's by the architectural practice called Hariri Pontarini, based in Toronto. And 180 people put forward plans for this. The Bahai religion wanted a temple in South America, and their beliefs were the 9 pathways and about the inner light within all of us. They basically they basically embrace everybody, whatever religion, race, gender, whatever you are, everybody's welcome. It's a very holistic religion, I understand. So light is really important to them. So he needed to get this design of light, and he's made this incredible glass, which he developed through experimentation, that is in the ceiling. And he's made light come through this massive eye, this oculus over here. And these are the 9 pathways. I love the way the landscaping around echoes those forms as well. And we've got a lovely sort of lake here, an artificial pond that reflects this at night time. So where did he get his inspiration from? Well, you won't believe it, but he actually got it from these 2 objects. So he looked at the way plants always lean towards the light. They follow the light. So important. When he first started designing this idea of a hall where everybody's welcome, with the 9 pathways and light, he said, I watched a lovely talk on a lecture from him, that he was, this is Hariri, that he ended up with all these awful egg forms, and he thought they're just too look like eggs, they're awful, and he wanted to get something that wasn't quite perfect, and he discovered these Japanese sacks, I suppose, baskets, and he really loved the sort of irregular shape of these baskets, and he thought, aha. So he made the visual connection from that, the visual connection from this, to form the overall design for this, as you can see. With these 2 slides, I was really glad to find these because they kind of, you can see that visual connection, can't you, that lead towards this beautiful design. So every building has a story to tell. Every building has a form. Every building has a function. So important. And you need, in order to do that, to have that creativity as an architect. And you'll only get that creativity from studying art. And if you go on to online to look at the requirements for architecture, yes, you need to know about maths, and you definitely need to know about physics. But the 3rd A level they require is art, because it is so important. So this is the quote I'm going to end with. We are what we build. Now, I want also you to consider this. We are what we build. We look back to the Fitzwilliam Museum. What was going on there? And the culture at the time was looking back to ancient antiquity, revering and highly esteeming the work that came from there. We have a lot, not just the Fitzwilliam. Think of the British Museum and many, many others. We have a lot of neoclassical buildings at that time. What about now? What are we alive now going to be remembered for in the history when we look back in time at this period? What buildings are being built now? And what does it say about us? Right.
Thank you, Serena. Thank you, Serena. Thank you for that really interesting and insightful walkthrough of art and architecture. I'm just going to put it out to questions. If anyone does have any questions, please post them there. One of the questions that's come through straight away from Theodora she's asked, could A-level art be studied if a student hasn't already taken GCSE art?
Oh, that's a very good question. Funnily enough, I would say a lot of my students haven't studied art before. Inevitably, there's a bit of work to do, but in fact, they do extremely well. I always say, if you've got the enthusiasm and hard work, that's all I require, basically, when people come to me. Because art is part of the UK curriculum from the age of 5 up to the age of 13, and then they can study it for GCSE and A-level. And it's not the same in many other countries. So no, I would not turn people away who hadn't done art before, no.
Okay, thanks very much. Please do post any other questions for Serena, and we'll answer those. A quick question from me, actually.
Okay.
What and it kind of filters into kind of what we're talking about now, but what kind of work would you expect students to be doing, you know, to sort of demonstrate their kind of their thinking and their progression before they maybe join us, maybe if they were joining us in September or January? What kind of work would you want them to be doing? What kind of pre-course work would you expect in art? Because it's maybe a little different.
That's another good one. I mean, it would be great for them to, because art is a language, it's a visual language. The more you do, it's a bit like you're trying to learn a language, the more you do it, the better you get. So drawing, definitely. And then maybe if they've got some paints and stuff like that, maybe start with some paintings, but choose any topic they like, because I think that you have more enthusiasm for that. But when I say drawing, what is the best form of drawing is drawing from life. So drawing from something in front of you is the best. If you can't do that, then perhaps an image that intrigues you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Serena. A question from Ozada. She's just asked, does every university require a portfolio? And I'm guessing that's every architecture school from students.
Yes, they do.
Okay, and that would be something that they would obviously develop as part of the program with us.
That's right, yes.
Which kind of universities do you find students sort of targeting for architecture, just out of interest?
Well, we have people mostly from us going to, I'm thinking about last year, UCL, which is called the Bartlett School, is extremely competitive for getting. We got somebody into that there last year. Manchester is very good, with her Norman Foster trained. There aren't a huge amount that offer courses, but there are some lovely ones. Edinburgh is another one. There are quite a few in London. There are some that go more an art route. So like Central St. Martin's, for example, is an art college, but they do architecture there as well, and Westminster University as well. So some have slightly different stresses and flavours, but and we've even had people apply to Cambridge University for architecture.
Brilliant. And for a student who's studying A levels, obviously we would expect them to have taken, you know, physics, maths, and art. If they had a fourth subject, is there something you would recommend, or is it, can it be quite open?
I think it could be quite open.
Mm.
I mean, it is a lot to take on for A levels if you're doing art, because art is time consuming. You have to remember that it's not something you can just whip off in an hour, like an hour's homework. So it does take time and time in the studio. Incidentally, we do have a room dedicated to sixth form, so they can come in their spare time to do extra work at Abbey. But maybe another humanity would be quite good. So maybe history or you know, English or something like that would be good.
Brilliant. Thank you, Serena. If anyone does have any final questions, please post them now and I'll put them to Serena. Otherwise, I think we'll sign off and call that a day. But thank you very much, Serena. Just waiting to see if anything pops up.
Okay.
Thank you for the insight. I love the seed cathedral. I thought it looked like a dandelion.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Which we have a lot of in the UK at the moment, which has these beautiful seed heads that disperse in the wind, and it looks like they're almost about to take off of that building. So it's lovely to see. Thank you very much, everyone. I think that's the end of the questions, but we will send obviously a copy of Serena's slides and a link to the video as well, so you can view that afterwards. And if you do have any questions, please do respond to that email, and we can put those to Serena or to the college itself. So please do post any questions that you have if you think of any, and we'd be very happy to pass them on to Serena. Serena, I'll let you say goodbye, and then I'll finish things off.
Goodbye, everybody. See you.
Goodbye, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon or evening wherever you are. Thank you very much for attending. Bye-bye.